they are longer. But it's not such hard. Demai is not as hard as I thought it would be. It's relative. I thought it would be very hard, difficult. It's relatively easy, at least so far. Okay, and Kilayim, which is the hardest Masechta, they say, has much shorter blots. Very short blots. Okay, we are on Halacha Beis, Perek Beis, Halacha Beis. Hamakapel of Lios Nama. These halachas are very nogei l'ma'aseh v'zman hazeh. Really, the Makapel of Lios Nama, somebody sets upon himself to be trustworthy. Maaser shumocher, he must take ma'ases of that which he sells, v'shoechel of that which he eats, v'shlokech and that which he buys. Vedom Yisrael Yitzlam is forbidden to eat by an Amoritz. Rabbi Yehuda says even if somebody eats by an Amoritz, he's still credible. Amrullah, they said baloney. He's not believing on his own self, and it was eaten by Amoratzim, so he's eating improper stuff. How can believe in other people's grain? So we'll see what the reason of Rabbi Yehuda is in the Gemara. In the meantime, the Gemara goes back to Rabbanan. Mashu lokeach. What does it say when it says in the Mishnah? He asked the Maisa which he buys. What is it referring to? I'm not slechol. Is that referring to what he's buying in order to eat? It says separately in the Mishnah. Eshu ochel. It says he has to Maisa which he eats. Maybe when it says the has to take Maisa of that which he buys, maybe that's that which he's buying with the intent to resell. That also is mentioned. Eshu mocher, that which he sells. Ella, rather, Eshu lokeach amanas limkor means one thing. As that which he buys, well, let me say that better. Eshu lokeach, that which it says, which he buys, that's amanas limkor, that is in fact which he buys in order to sell. The second statement in the Mishnah, Eshu mocher, that's referring to Eshu mocher miperos michna, so that which he sells from the fruit which he has stockpiled in his own backyard. No, it's from his own produce. So therefore, when it says Eshu lokeach, it's referring to that which he's buying in order to sell, and Eshu mocher, it's referring to that which he has produced and now he wants to sell it. Okay, says the Gemara Tani, we learned, Rabbi Yehuda said, this is Rabbi Yehuda of our Mishnah, Mimeyen shel balabatim. As long as there have been balabatim in the Jewish people, and that's since time immemorial, they never abstain from being guests by their fellow balabatim. Nonetheless, noagim b'peiroseihem, their custom with their food is misukonim l'toch beiseihem, that when they bring it into their house, they're masaking it. In other words, there are many people who eat kosher in, but are not so makbid on eating kosher out, right? It's orthodox, you find Orthodox Jews, he's saying, who when they go there, they'll eat fish in a restaurant, they'll eat vegetables, they'll eat things which might not be so kosher v'yosher, but in their house they'll be very medakdek, right? So that's what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Rabbi Yehuda is saying this is a double standard. He recognizes it exists for thousands of years already. The double standard is people are more makbid in their own home than they are when they go out. So therefore Rabbi Yehuda says even if you eat stuff which is not so when you go to your friend's house or to a restaurant or whatever, nonetheless we could trust you at home.
But he was referring to Demai, not necessarily the kashrus.
No, he's referring to Demai, but Demai is a kashrus issue now. Once Demai has become prohibited, Midrabanan, it becomes a kashrus issue, like anything else, right?
Except the main kashrus issue is with the Doraisa, and Demai is still...
No, granted, I'm not saying we can infer from this necessarily to Doraisas, but we do see a principle Rabbi Yehuda holds that there is a double standard. One is more makbid inside one's house than outside one's house. Okay? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yonah said, now here we're going to have machlokas Rabbi Yonah and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yonah and Rabbi Yossi's machlokas is in Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yonah says, Chaverin enen chashtim lo le'echov lo la'achil. It's even though the balabatim go and eat in their fellow balabatim's houses, which are questionable, we don't suspect that they're either going to eat nor give other people to eat demai. Meaning that when they go to their other balabatim's house, the other balabatim's houses, then they either mafresh the demai from that which they eat in that other house. So an interesting thing. In other words, if you, a Baal Bus, go to somebody else's house and eat there in their house, demai, so we assume, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that you're a credible person, we assume that you're going to meiser when you go there. Okay, it's kind of like if you go to somebody else's house, again using the kashrus analogy, when you go to somebody else's house, so you'll tell them that you're not going to eat everything because you're makbid on nechvei schol v'yisrael yashon glat, whatever the case may be. That's Rabbi Yona's perspective. Rabbi Yosef says, chaverim chashudim le'achol. These ba'abatim who are according to Rabbi Yehuda, they're credible in their own houses. They're chashudim le'achol and chashudim le'achil. That's because they draw a dichotomy. People are suspect to eat demai in other people's houses, even though they're not suspect to feed you demai in their own house. So he says they don't meiser when they go to somebody else's house, but they're willing to be saimech. When they go to Yerushalmi's house, so they'll eat non-glat meat, or they'll eat stuff which is questionable, hashkochas, but sometimes it's the same thing. But they when they're at home, they'll be very makbid. So it's a machlokas as to what the chavers, and I guess it's a machlokas in psychology. Machlokas, what the chaver who has this double standard, how he's conducting himself in the other person's house. According to Rabbi Yoina, he's conducting himself by being masakin wherever he goes, and according to Rabbi Yosef, he's conducting himself by not being masakin, but at home he is tip-top. Says Masnisi pliga al Rabbi, and here there's a Hagah, Masnisa pliga al Rabbi Yoina. Our Mishnah argues Rabbi Yoina. Rabbi Yoina is the one who says that he fixes up wherever he goes. How does our Mishnah argue Rabbi Yehuda on Rabbi Yona? Because it says in our Mishnah, Amru lo, that Rabbanan said to Rabbi Yehuda, Al atzmo ein anamon. He's not credible on himself. Heichi anamon al shalacherim. How is he going to believe in anybody else's stuff? Now it's clear that Rabbanan understood Rabbi Yehuda as having said that when he eats out, he's not going to eat tip-top good stuff. And if it was like Rabbi Yonah that wherever he goes, he's going to make sure to be misakin as he eats it. So then, what are Rabbanan saying to Rabbi Yehuda? By definition, the Rabbanan are attacking Rabbi Yehuda on this point that they're saying that he's not believing on himself. Therefore, how can he be believed vis-a-vis others? It must be that they held in Rabbi Yehuda, like Rabbi Yoina, that he's not going to, like Rabbi Yossi rather, not like Rabbi Yoina, right? It's an argument to Rabbi Yoina, that wherever he goes, he's not going to fix it, he's just going to let it slide. Now, however, on the other hand, Milayah the Rabbanan, the words of the rabbis who we'll learn imminently, Messiah and Rabbi Yossi, they assist Rabbi Yossi and tell us that the guy, wherever he goes,
Rabbi Yosi here too.
Here it is. Let me check. Should it be Yoina here? Let's see. I forgot. Milai the Rabbanim Messiah Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi, let's see if it works for Rabbi Yossi and how it changes to Rabbi Yoina. The Rabbi Yossi says that Chaverim Achashurim La'achol. No, this is a raya. No, this is correct. Milai the Rabbanim. So both the first thing was a raya against Rabbi Yoina, and this is a raya for Rabbi Yossi. But in essence, it's two sides of the same coin, right? We're pushing off Rabbi Yoina and assisting Rabbi Yossi. Milai Rabbanim Messiah Rabbi Yossi, who says when they eat out, they're suspect. How so? Rabbi Chanina said, and Rabbi Yasa said, B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan Loma Rabbi Yehuda B'Sof. Rabbi Yehuda only said that he's credible out in his own house. That's called B'Sof. But at the beginning, which means in somebody else's house, Of Rabbi Yehuda Moide, Rabbi Yehuda also is Moda. In other words, if you're eating with a chaver in another Baal Bas's house, so even Rabbi Yehuda agrees if he says, according to this version, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees if you say to the chaver, pass me the carrots, and he passes them to you, you can't assume that he was mafresh, trumus amaisis on them, right? Because he's in somebody else's house. According to Rabbi Yoina, you would assume that he was mafresh, because he doesn't go anywhere unless he's mafresh. How is he mafresh? Under the table, he mumbled some incantation, whatever the case may be. But according to Rabbi Yossi, you can't rely on him whatsoever, okay? Now, that's a difficult translation of Tchila and Sof. I admit that. But I don't think there's any better translation. Tchila means here in somebody else's house, and Basof means in your own house, okay?
It can't be the other way around.
What?
Can't be the other way
No,
around.
it would never be the other way around, because he wouldn't be a chaver then. By a chaver definition is somebody who we know we can trust when he's at home. Okay? So, let me just see if he gives any other translation here.
So Rabbi Yehuda's motive that if you are at somebody else's house, that he would not take off.
Right. Before you came in, we mentioned that there's a kind of Rabbi Yehuda holds that there are guys who have double standards, who eat kosher in, but not so makpeh and kashrus out. Whereas Rabbanan hold, if there's such a double standard guy, we don't trust him at all.
Except Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah says, "Maserecha Eitzel Am Haaretz is Nemor."
Right, but not in that house.
Oh.
Anywhere else. In other words, in his own house if he invites you. Okay? It says Gemara, so now the Gemara itself goes into the process of explaining this raya. If you're going to say that chaverim are not suspect, neither to eat nor to feed, what's the difference whether he's at home or on somebody else's turf? So it must be, since there's a difference, that we hold like Rabbi Yoina, that like Rabbi Yossi, that people have double standards. Period. Then Dalet should be taken off the next word according to the Gra, and it's a new statement. Tani, we learned. Ha-makabel alav lios ne'amar chutz midavrecha. Person says, I want to be makabel myself for everything except for one thing. I'm not going to be makabel for one thing. Let's say carrots, I'm not going to meiser Demai. Right? So in that case, ne'amar chutz midavrecha, also. We don't accept it. Ha-chosho davrecha, somebody suspect on one thing, chosho alko. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Eino Choshed also Dover Bilvad. Rabbi Yehuda is saying, so there's a sheet consistent with the sheet previously, that people do have double standards, and for that which they're makbid, they are makbid. Now I just want to, can I say something controversial here? If you give me a second. I'll even willing to say it on the tape. I want to point out that we really abide, even though we, technically speaking, we don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, we do abide by him to a great extent. For instance, a number of years ago, there was Lubavitcher Sefer printed. In fact, that Lubavitcher is just coincidental, called Hajjus Panim Zakan, a book all about how people must grow beards, and how it's a terrible, terrible isser not to have a beard. So in any event, in this book, he has a whole section in which he says that you're not allowed to eat anything in the house of a woman who doesn't cover her hair. Right? Because if she doesn't cover her hair, she's choshed. She's choshed davrechad. She's choshed for everything. So what's the response to that? There are many responses one can give. But the response is that to a certain extent we do accept Rabbi Yehuda. Even if somebody has some, let's call it, for want of a better term, subpar halachic behavior in one area, and all of us do, right? Who of us is perfect in all areas? Nonetheless, we assume that for those things which they are ne'eman, they're ne'eman. In other words, for people who have accepted upon themselves, if social mores dictate that one area of halacha is lax, another area of halacha is held at a much higher level, so then we're willing to accept that that's how human behavior is conducted. So Rabbanan said it's not true by Demai. If you're going to, if in the same area of human behavior, you're going to be makbid on Demai in one place and not makbid in another place, you can't do that, right? You can't be, the davar echad here, if you're going to be lenient in Demai in certain places, we can't rely upon you in Demai in other places. But in terms of different areas of halacha, just because you're lax in one area of halacha doesn't mean you're lax in all areas of halacha. With the exception, of course, being mumar l'chalol Shabbos, some mumar l'hachis, etc., the things which are discussed in Masechta Chulin. Okay?
I was wondering whether, in fact, the whole discussion is more about mumar has any relationship to this whole issue here.
Right. This would probably be a parallel discussion, even though the Gemara doesn't use the term mumar. So this would probably be a parallel discussion to mumar l'davar echad. And Rabbi Yehuda says it's possible in a davar echad to create a dichotomy, right? Because you might have credibility even in that davar echad, even if it's not across the board, right? A mumar l'davar echad we pass is not a mumar l'kol Torah kula, right? But even in that one thing, our question is well how we look at it. Okay. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, I don't know, Tani, we learned Taneman ala Taros. Now, it's very interesting, halacha. If you're credible vis-a-vis Tara, Tuman Tara, and a person who's accepted by himself and is trustworthy vis-a-vis Tuman Tara, Neman HaMeiser is certainly believe vis-a-vis Meiser. Because Tara is, of course, as we all know, Tuman Tara is much more difficult than Meiserus, right? The main thing requires a much higher level of safekeeping. Tanisa, we learned, Tanisa Rabbi Yanai Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Yanai said this brisa in the house of Rabbi Shmuel. V'amar taima hada the tamar. I'm not sure what the word taima does here. Taima literally means logic, but here I'm not sure if that's what it means here. He said a qualification. I think would be a better translation. He said a qualification. That's true when that's true when you're a guest in somebody's own house. But if somebody wants to publicize that he is Neman on Maisrus, Eino Neman on Shekavah Barabim. He's not believed until he takes a public acceptance. So it's a very interesting thing. Here we see the concept of really, we see that for communal hashgacha, you need a higher level of certainty than for a private hashgacha, for eating in somebody's house. Because here, what we're saying is, if you know Yankel is makbid on Taras, you can rely on him for Maisrus. But that's only is going into his house. But if he's going to start selling stuff and saying, I'm makbid on Taras, believe me on Maisrus, at that point he has to be makabel v'rabim, that he's going to be neman on Maisrus. So a higher standard is required for communal behavior. Okay? It's a very interesting concept. Okay? This really is the basis for the entire concept of hashgachas bisman hazeh. Because according to the simple pshat, normally we say eid echonem bisurin. So what's the difference? Eid echonem bisurin if it's I'm going to eat in his house, so he's running a factory. So we see here it's not necessarily the same thing. There are gradations. It's a famous story. I forget. I don't know. It's not famous, but is a story which I once saw, and I can't be that famous because I don't remember who it was about. I think it was one of the Ger Rebbes that he once had a chassid who used to take a vat of goose fat from every year as a matana. He didn't ask him any questions. So one year, the chassid, still going back to the 19th century, it's an old Maisa. So one year the chassid went into the goose fat business. So that year it brought him also. It was no longer just a hobby; it was his business. So that year he brought the Rebbe a vat of goose fat as a present, as usual. So the Rebbe said to him, "Who's your hashgacha?" So he said, "Rebbe, you never asked me about this till now." So he said, till now you were a private individual. Now you're in business. Now you need hashgacha on it. Okay? This is really what the Gemara is saying here. Okay? Says the Gemara further, Rabbi Zir and Rabbi Yasa both said b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, Afilu chaver nema, afilu chaver sheshal chaver tzarich laiser. If I send you grain or food of any sort, produce, I have to meiser before I send it to you. Hi, I'm a chaver and you're a chaver. Nonetheless, I have to suspect that you're gonna rely on me, and then I have the meiser before I give it to you. Rabbi Zira boy kumi Rabbi Yasa, Rabbi Zira asked in front of Rabbi Yasa, could go nani. Let somebody such as myself. Le Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. If I send food to Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak, it was another chaver. Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, Li. Do we also have to meiser back and forth? Amar Leis, he said, Mat boy, what are you asking, Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak? Everything you eat, and the way the disciple's son explains it, he eats it when it's already bought from a kosher store. Now, if you go to Machne Yehuda, so there's the few stores which have Eida Charedis Hechsher, right? which you know they do with Trumas and Meiser, right? I haven't been machna in about 20 years. I was saying, yeah.
More of them have Eidach Freydis than
don't. So he was that kind of fellow. He never thought about Trumas and Meiser, just went to a kosher store. You know, like you go and you buy all this stuff in milk pail or kotum because they don't want to worry about hashkochas. So he's certainly Adarab. If you sent to him, so he's such a tmim sticker guy, and he never gets involved in meisering, and he always buys someplace already meiser. Therefore, for sure, you have to take meisers off before you send to him. Okay, because he's very trusting. Now, very interesting law, very sad Gemara. Hu neman, he's trustworthy. V'ishto eino nemenes, but his wife is not trustworthy. So what happens in that case? Lochi man, you can buy from him stuff because that stuff he's selling. Ve'misarchin etzlo, but you can't be a guest in his house. No, it's a new statement. There's a period after hu achal. Threw me off too the first time I looked at it. No, it's a new statement. Hu nema, not a person is Yankel is trustworthy, and his wife is not trustworthy. And it's lochi man, you can buy from him. So, but you can't be a guest in his house. But they said, woe unto this man, he's like living with a snake in the same lair. I don't know. I thought I translated as lair. I think it's a small, constricted space, because a kfafot in Hebrew are gloves. So kfifo is like, a mitten, a glove, something in a small constricted space. Ishton amenes. If the opposite is true, his wife is trustworthy. Who ain't an eman, he's not trustworthy. So you can be a guest in his house, but you can't buy from him. The opposite. Avol amru, but Chazal said tavo meira, may a curse befall. Literally, meira is some disease. Lamisha or some, not a disease, a curse of poverty. Tava meir lamisha ishton ne'emenes, may the curse befall somebody whose wife is credible, who ain't on ne'eman, and he is not credible. Okay? Period. Tani, we learned, lo yishamish chaver b'mishta ha'aretz. A chaver should not be a serve in a mishta where amaratzim, Now, it's not that he's the caterer, he's the waiter, right? He shouldn't be the waiter. Not in their mission, not in their drinking parties, nor in their meals. Unless you're sure to make sure that everything is fixed and meistered under his hand. Even the barrel of wine in the basement, he has to go and meister that. Why? Because people seem there to think, Rebbe Yankel is here serving. We have to be afraid. With Mistom, everything is okay. So he has to make sure that everything is okay. And since that is the case, if you go see a waiter who's a Talmud Chacham at an Amoratz's party, you can assume everything is meiser, because he wouldn't serve unless he had made sure everything was tip-top. Ro so masive, however, you see him not serving, but an invited guest to the party of the Amoritz. Ain't a chazaka. In that case, there's no such chazaka. Why? I assume not that everything is meiser, but he's relying on, all sorts of mumbo jumbo in his heart, right? He said it should be the north side. He took off a little sliver. It was meiser and a pruta in his house. In other words, he did all sorts of things for himself, but the rest of the meal might not be kosher, might be trade. But knows meisiv etzlo tzorech laser al yodov. If the Talmud Chacham, it has a son there, so he has to be meiser for his son. However, Chaver and Tzorech Laser Yodov, if you have the Talmud Chacham has a friend there, he doesn't have to meiser for his friend again, because his friend has no business relying on him. We just said so. Therefore, the Talmud Chacham is not responsible for his friend. And all these cases where the Talmud Chacham is not serving but an invited guest. Okay. Next Mishnah. Hamakabel of Leos Chaver. You accept by yourself to be a chaver. You can't sell to the Amoretz lach, moist food. Now we're switching gears to what? Tuma, right? moist food because it's muksher l'kabel tuma, right? We're not talking about the Demai anymore, obviously, right? You can't sell moist food nor even dry food because what can happen to dry food? It can get wet. That's right. You have a shveina lokech menu lach. You're not allowed to buy from him moist food because what might have happened to the law of moist food? Right, Mike came to tell me. Even if he tells you it didn't. You can't believe him, right? You can't be a guest by Amoretz. That's this Rabbanon, right? You can't be a guest by Amoretz. No, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, this might be the case. Even according to Rabbi Yehuda, you shouldn't be a guest by him, vis-a-vis tumatara. Nor can he be a guest in your house in his own clothing. Why? Because what might his clothing be? Medras Zav, Medras Nida. So if he is a guest in your house, you got to make him change before he comes in, right? It's a very big chumrah, right?
It's restricting any kind of
social intercourse, right? There's no, in the old days, there really was a great divide between the, yeah. So, right, it's not a good thesis. Not just because Louis Finkelstein said it, but because we'll see in the Gemara an interesting statement. We will see in a minute. Rabbi says, you want to be a chaver, you can't grow sheep. Why can't you grow sheep? They graze in other people's fields, right? They generate theft. And you cannot make so many oaths. You can't be a frivolous person. And you cannot go be matami yourself for mesim. And you have to be in the base medrash all the time. Amrulo, they said to him, this has nothing to do with being muksel l'tara. In other words, you're saying that only if you're a pious person are you muksel l'tara. You can be not so pious and still be muksel l'tara. It's two different things, right? Halacha is one thing, piety is another thing. Says the word further. You're not allowed to buy from him lach, moist stuff. That's the same Mishnah. Yavish mutter. But if it's dry, you're allowed to buy from him. Why? They're not believed to say that if it was moist, it didn't become tummy. But they're believed to say it wasn't muksha. That they're believed. Because that doesn't require muksha expertise. Here it's not talking about kashrus, but rather it's talking about hechsher l'kabel tuma. So they're believed to say it's those a muksha l'kabel tuma. That they are believed on. So if it's dry, you can buy it from them. V'tani kain, we also learned that in Brisa. Amoritz lomar peres halol lo uchshru. Amoritz believed to say these peres are not muksha l'kabel tuma. Avol eino, it should be eino neman. Do you have eino neman?
Yes.
It says avol eino neman? So it's a typo in here. Yeah, it's on the bottom here, but not on the top. Okay, let me put it in.
Something to be muksha l'kabel tuma, doesn't the owner of the food want it to become for that water to make it matzah l'kabel tuma? Yeah, it has to be that the boss wants to be muksha. Yeah. So
he might want. He doesn't know all those distinctions.
So he may not have.
No, that makes the word. We don't have to know the concept though. You just have to want it moist, even if you don't know. It's not a consequential of lishma, right? That you know what you're doing, even if the Amoritz wanted them to get wet in order that it should look nicer. So it's not. We can't trust him on this issue altogether. That's just the bottom line. Now, Hamichlal, by virtue of the fact that Rabbi Yehuda just adds on stuff in our Mishnah about how pious you have to be, from this we can conclude, we can infer, do Modeh, that he concedes, B'kamaisa, that you're not allowed to, that which Chazal said, the Rabbanan said, you're not allowed to be a guest by an Amoritz, that Rabbi Yehuda must agree to that. How can he agree to that? What about Rabbi Yoina? Leisa da pliga leid Rabbi Yoina. Doesn't this argue Rabbi Yoina? Rabbi Yoina mar chaberin ene chashurim lo echov lo lachil. In the last Mishnah we said earlier today that he can't eat by an Amoritz. He'll just make sure to take off the Demai by an Amoritz. So this seems to argue Rabbi Yonah. So how do we reconcile this with Rabbi Yonah's statement? Says the Gemara, even Rabbi Yonah concedes. There's a dichotomy between Demai and Tuma. Yes, you, a Baal Boss, can go to your fellow Baal Boss and take off the Mai. Take off the Truma and Maisus there on the side from your plate. And Rabbi Yonah holds you can do that. But this is a higher Madrega. Our Mishnah will tell you about somebody who's Nizar on Tuma and Tara. It's impossible to go to Amoritz's house, even according to Rabbi Yonah, and make sure that you're going to stay Tahar. You can't do that. So therefore, if in a guy question where it's a guy who's Makab by himself from Maisris, so he can still go to Amoritz's house, according to Rabbi Yonah, and make sure not to eat stuff which is Demai by being mafish from his plate. But vis-a-vis Tum and Tara, there's no way to save yourself. Once you makabel that, you can't eat by an Amoritz anymore. Okay? No, be patient. Says the Gemara, V'afilu Rabbi Yossi le'esador pliga. Doesn't this even argue Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Yossi mar chaverin chashurim le'acho, ve'en chashurim le'achil. It says it says back there that chaverim are suspect to eat, but they're not suspect to feed. In other words, in Rabbi Yehuda's Shita, he held it's true when he goes to his friend's house, he's going to eat stuff which is not ticed properly, but he's still credible in his own house. Yet here it seems even Rabbi Yehuda is conceding the point that vis-a-vis Tuma and Tara, if he wants to be credible, he can't have a double standard. He's got to be makbid outside the house just like inside the house. Because he didn't argue on Rabban and the Reisha. Rabban and the Reisha said, you want to be Naaman on Tumah, you can't eat by an Amoritz. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't come along and argue. So it sounds like here he concedes the point. Says, Mori, you're right. Come on. There, and here's the typo again, the Gross says it should be Taman l'maisrus. Have a locha l'tarus. By Maisra we have a lower standard. Again, it's less complex, it's easier to keep. So therefore we can rely on somebody who has this, double standard. But here there's no such thing. Right? Because who knows? If he goes to eat by Namoritz, maybe he became Tommy then. So therefore here we can't rely on him, even if he eat according to Rabbi Yehuda, if he goes and eats to other people's houses. But we still believe him. And here, well, usually monetary loss is more reason to be suspect of a person. But here we're not more suspect. We're more suspect by Tumah. Here we assume this person wants to do the right thing. Just by Tumah and Tara, it's much harder to do the right thing. So therefore you need more stringent safeguards in order to make sure you don't come into contact with Tumah. Now, says the Gemara further, Hanemon alamayel taros to Hanemon alamaisris. We learned now, somebody who's bleeding on taros, certainly Hanemon alamaisris, right? Time we learned, anybody wants to be Hanemon on taros, tzarech l'kabel olav. He has to accept upon himself. Afilu chover, even if he's already a chover vis-a-vis maisris, even if he's a Talmud Chacham. However, there is an exception. Abo Chacham sheyeshe b'yeshiva, somebody who's already a Chacham, not a Talmud Chacham. A Chacham, meaning a Rosh Yeshiva, who's sitting in Yeshiva and saying shiur. In the old days, that meant you had a standard of knowledge of halacha. Eino tzarech l'kavol olav. He doesn't have to accept upon himself anything else. Shekvar kibelo mishar sheyashav. The moment he became the Rosh Yeshiva, it's clearly indicative, even if he didn't express himself as such, it's clearly indicative that we recognize that he knows that he has to be accept the higher standards of halacha. So therefore, we assume that he's makbid on Tara. Okay? Amar Rabbi Law said, "Who should keep a law b'shar rishayna?" That's only if we know that previously he was makabel Tara. So just because it became Rosh Yeshiva, it doesn't become automatically holy. Rabbi Law argues. He says you need an explicit Kabbalah earlier in life. Depends on Yeshiva, right? Rabbi Yossi asks, if he was ready to count on himself earlier, then what's the difference? So there's a chaver, is hamaretz, he's ready to makabel. So says more, no. Asked Rabbi Lakish Lakish, and now we will gleefully shoot Louis Finkelstein's theory full of holes. Okay? Asiyat Rabbi Lakish Lakish. What does Rabbi Law say? Rabbi Law is going like Reish Lakish. The Reish Lakish Rabbi Shimon Lakish have a solik legabe ilin the base Rabbi Yanai. He was going to the house of Rabbi Yanai. And the house of Rabbi Yanai is a funny story. It could only happen in the old days. It couldn't happen today. The women saw the big Rosh Yeshiva Reish Lakish. This is when he was a big Rosh Yeshiva coming in. They ran away from him. Why? Because they were nidos. And so what? The begodim were tamei. And they assume Reish Lakish is coming. How can they stay in his presence, right? They might be matami, right? So Amar alone, he said to them, Avo l'chom beisa. Don't worry, I'll come into your house even if you're there. I'm a oretz ani etzel taras. Even me, the great Reish Lakish, I was never a makabah upon myself vis-a-vis taras. So you see, says the Gemara, like Rabbi Law, that even though he's a zakin v'yoshev yeshiva, it doesn't matter. He has to sechach v'yoshev yeshiva. He still has to be makabel upon himself vis-a-vis taros explicitly, because otherwise some people didn't accept upon themselves. It was too tough a chumrah to be machmir. So now you see that even among the Talmidei Chachamim in the old days, it was a big madreg to be machmir on taros, and even Reish Lakish, one of the greatest Amoraim of the Torah, he wasn't makabel upon himself. They assumed he was makabel upon himself to be makbid on Torah, but he wasn't makbid on it. Okay?
Leaving aside the weakness,
Yeah.
This is not Zman Bayis.
Close space English, yeah.
And the word about Taharis?
Yeah.
Why?
It's not. Why am I stuttering? There are two reasons. One reason is because they actually thought the base of Mikdash should be speedily rebuilt. It wasn't by them something which was, abstract concept. Besides that, however, it's generally regarded as being a madrega in trying to aspire to higher heights of spirituality to be makbid on Tumah and Tara. Even after the base of Mikdash was destroyed, they still used paraduma, they still had mikveh, they still had all these things, because there was considered to be a higher madrega, and that you might call us mystical. I'm not denying that. To higher madrega of Tara. It's a fascinating passage in the Heicholos. The Heicholos is a Kabbalistic text from the time of the second base of Mikdash. Aryeh Kaplan translated some of it in Meditation in Kabbalah, and he brings down there that when Rabbi Shmuel, the Kohen Gadol, used to have Aliyas Neshama, used to meditate, in order to bring him back down, they used to touch him with the beged of a needle. So you see that Tumah actually has a spiritual impact on a person. So therefore, they wanted, with those of them who wanted to be very spiritual and wanted to have, what Chazal call Chacham Adif Min Navi, so they actually were makbid on Tumah and Tara. That's what I would answer. For quite a few years after the Korban. That's right. Okay. Says Tani, we learned how do you makabel to be a chaver? Hu nana l'chabura. He goes and accepts it in front of a group, and a group of your chabura is what we would call in the Bavli a bastin. 3 people. But his children, members of the household, they don't have to go to the base, and they accept it in front of their father. Istadi Tana. There's another price which said, who bought of him named Beso, he and his children, members of his household, nanny the Chabur, they all have to go to the basin together. Lo Poig is not a machlokas. Where they're subordinate to their father, then they just have to accept to their father. When they're not subordinate to the father, they're already mature, so in that case they have to accept it independently. Tani, we learned, Rabbi Chalafta ben Shol said, adult children, they go in front of the basement. The minor children, they go in front of the father alone, and that's sufficient. Tani, we learned, there's a process in becoming a chaver vis-a-vis taros. First you learn about the stuff which has to do with the wings, and then afterwards for taros. What's wings? Rabbi Lazar, knafayim, madofos, knafayim is the tumah of touching things, Vesesos and moving things, which are easy. The next step is taros. Next step is taros, maestros. Now I'm not sure what maestros has to do with it exactly, but my assumption is that we're talking about, medrash of nida and stuff like that, which are much more complicated halachos, which are much more likely to cause tuma and tara v'tuma vis-a-vis maestros. In other words, generally people, it's very easy to safeguard not to touch, when you're tummy, to touch maestros and stuff like that. But this is probably talking about, coming into contact with tummy, begodim, and such like, which are more complex halachas. In any event, I'm not sure if that's the correct interpretation. It's vague, but what we do see here is that there's certain things which are easier to learn and certain things which are harder to learn, and it's a graduated process. Okay?
There's a discussion somewhere about with respect to is that
that's a separate thing. I don't think that's what it's talking about here. That they're going to Tuma on Sifrei Torah. So he wouldn't, because they used to put Truma in the Aron with Sifrei Torah, and then Mount Mice used to come and eat the Sifrei Torah. I don't think it's relevant. But Rishonim Roman. At the beginning they said, Chaver Shenase Gabai, a Chaver became a tax collector, Dochinoso, Chavuroso. He has to leave his Chaverus because he's engaged in proper, parnosa. Yotza Mikviyoso. Once he leaves the Gabos, however, Harei Chaver. He is considered to be a Chaver, he doesn't need a new Kabbalah. No, it's only a temporary penalty against him as long as he's a tax collector. Rabbi Yochanan said, look at this. Chaver sheyatzel chutzarts, a chaver went to chutzarts, ein dochnoso michaveroso. He's not, despite the fact you're not supposed to go to chutzarts, nonetheless he's considered to be a chaver. When? Now, true, the Gra changes the gears, the next word is da kamon. When he comes back in front of us, ain't tzar kiruv, he doesn't require additional kiruv. In other words, we assume that even though he went to chutzarts, when he comes back, he's still a chaver. Okay? Because he came back, right. On chutzarts, there's no d'mai, so it's not a relevant issue. Hanachtomi lo chivoso chacham, hanachtomi, bakers. Lo chivoso chachami lafrish, okay, trumas meister v'chala. They're only required for the d'mai to set aside the trumas meister and the chala, not the meister sheni. That's responsibility of the buyer, not the seller. The Gemara is going to say because of slim profit margins. Okay? That's true about anybody who sells in large measures. Kigon, such as hasitonos. Oh, sorry. Chomashim mida gasa, to the gear steam problem. It's the wrong gears in the Mishnah. Chomashim mida gasa. Rashoim linkors are allowed to sell d'mai. In other words, they have small profit margins. People who sell large measures sell more inexactly. And since they sell inexactly, they're usually giving more than they're getting paid for. So since that's the case, it will cut too drastically into their profit margin if we made them take off d'mai. So therefore, Chazal were making on them, they don't have to take off d'mai. It's the buyer's responsibility, not the seller's. Okay? Says the word Tamotinim, we learned over there, Halokech mina nachtom, Ketzad hu meiser. It says the buyer's got to take a meisers. Yeah. Ain't no returning close to the mic. There it's a typo. It should be Chomashmiyim Mida Gasa Rashoim because of my are allowed to sell the mic. Chenvonim are not because they sell small amounts. Sitonos are there. Literally in Hebrew and in modern Hebrew, Sitonos means wholesalers. So wholesalers are allowed to sell the mic because their profit margin is relatively small. Okay? Yeah. Kamon today we learned over there. How does somebody buys a nachtam? How does he take off meisus? Hacha. Yet here atamar lokech mafresh. Here is saying the buyer's got to take off trumas meisus. V'acha atamar, and there you're saying. Here you're saying this way, and here you're saying hanachto mafresh. So what's the dichotomy here? So Rabbi Yonah said, Ispalgan Rabbi Loz and Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Loz and Rabbi Yochanan argued about it. Chad Amar Kambos Betara, the Kambos Tuma. Once the distinction is whether the Nachtom is a Chaver who's doing a stuff Betara, or he's an Amoris who's doing stuff Betuma. If he's doing stuff Betara, then we'll make him take off Trumas Meiser and Challah, because we tar. If he's making stuff in Tuma, however, so we don't want him to take off Trumas Meiser and Challah, because he might be metameid afterwards, right? We want to make sure to leave that tar. So we tell him, you know what, you don't take it off, because you're going to be metameid. You leave it for us to take it off, okay?
What do we do? Do we say he needs to get rid of it? And then again, you require again. So she prayed. No.
Just so he says the opposite here.
The first one, that he's covered.
No, I'm right. Yeah, if you do a betara, if he does a betara, so we make him take it off. We say you take it off. There's an advantage, and you make sure to keep it tar. It's a slight different spin than what I said a minute ago. If he does this stuff betara, he's a baker who keeps tara. So then I say, oh, you take it off because you're going to keep it tar. If you give it to Amoritz and he takes it off, who knows? He might make it tummy. If, however, he's a baker who's an Amoritz, and he's going to do... No, it's the opposite of what I said before. Forget what I said before. Just listen to what I have to say now, okay? If he's a baker who does stuff betara, then we say, you take it off, because you'll be makbid on tara. Who knows if the buyer is going to be makbid on tara? You do it. If he's a baker who's an Amoritz, we say, anyway, it's going to be tummy. So therefore, you don't have to do it. We'll let the buyer do it. That's what I said before? Okay, fine. So that's what it means. Kambos of Betara, then we make the baker take it off. Kambos of Betara, we say let the buyer take it off. The Charan Amar, another one said, Kam b'mida daka, the kan b'mida gasa. If he's a wholesale baker, then we don't make him take off the Demai. Again, because his margins are smaller. If he's a retail baker, it sells b'mida daka, in other words, small measures, we make him take off. Why? Because then his profit margins are higher. We make him take off trumas, meiser, and challah. Okay? We didn't know which said which. Did Rabbi Lozer say as far of Tautum and Tara, Rabbi Yochanan mida gasa mida daka, or vice versa? But for now, which Rabbi Yochanan said elsewhere, because of Taros, Heve, we can derive from this, the Rabbi Lozer do Omar Ka, do Omar, Rabbi Lozer the one who said, Kam mida daka, kam mida gasa. The Kasha Rabbi Yochanan, however, the Kasha Rabbi Yochanan is as follows. If he's a baker who's doing betara, so let him take off the Meiser Sheni also. Why doesn't he have to take off Meiser Sheni? Why does Trumas Meiser and Chal let him take off Meiser Sheni? Says the Mora Bedinu Ayah. Really, the truth is, it should have been Shelo Yafish Klub, that he shouldn't take off anything. Why does he have to take off anything? He's a baker. He's not eating it. Let him not take off anything. Ella, now here the gears is all messed up. This is the way to read it according to the Gra. Ella, except she'ein mosrin, Ella she'ein mosrin taros lamoritz. You don't give over taros lamoritz. In other words, really, we shouldn't have made him take. It's not vada here. The word vada is clearly wrong. It's talking about the mai here, right? It's talking about the mai. So therefore, what it means to say is that the only reason we made a baker take off anything is because he's makbid on Tara and the Amoritz is not. Right? So Bedinu that we shouldn't make him take off anything. It was a Chumer or Machman on him. Since you keep Tara, we're going to make him take off the Chal and Trumas Meiser. But in essence, we're penalizing him because he's from. So therefore, we're not going to penalize him to such a great extent. We're not going to make him take off Meiser Sheni, only Trumas Meiser Chal, which are negligible amounts. Okay? The Kasha of the Rebbe Lozer. Again, however, let's ask the Kasha in the other direction. According to Rebbe Lozer, who says, there are missions talking about a Mida Daka, a retail baker. If it's Mida Daka, Yapishal Kol. If it's a Mida Daka, he should have to take off on all of it. So, the Gemara doesn't answer. So this leaves it up in the air. Period. New sugi. Hachenvani ein rashai limkor. Demai. A chenvani is not allowed to sell demai. We saw in the Mishnah. Chevraya b'shem Rabbi Lazar said, the chevra said, name Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Meir. This is Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, lo yitiru limkor demai el sitam mevad. Only wholesalers can sell demai, not storekeepers. They sell small measures. They can't sell demai. Rabbi Yossi argued for Mastisa. Rabbi Yossi asked the kasha for Mastisa pliga. Doesn't the Bryce argue on that? What does the Bryce say? Eluain mashpin b'mid eluain. What are those who don't have to take off demai? Hamashpin b'mid gasa gonna see those who sell large measures, such as wholesalers, umochrei tfua, and sellers of grain. Have a yischaronin. So there are others. Besides storekeepers, there are others who don't have to take off the mai. At least grain sellers. So Rabbi Yossi said, you know what? Lo al Rabbi Ilo Amar. Rabbi Ilo didn't appear previously, but the Chevraya obviously includes Rabbi Ilo. So not on this did Rabbi Ilo or the Chevraya say that's going according to Rabbi Meir. Rather, Lo al Amar Rabbi Ilo Amar Damilsa El Ador. But rather on the following statement. The Tani we learned, when is this true? So when is it true he doesn't have to take that he doesn't have to take off the mai? A chenvani. When he sells at his own store. Or Pesach Hanuso, an opening to a store. And now, although it's not in the Gemara itself, the Stipe son introduces a concept from the Bavli. The truth is it's okay by a chenvani. It's not because he sells b'midah daka they has to take off tonight. It's because no. Just a second. Here's the new stand. It's not a chenvani. I apologize. Scratch that. Chenvani is because of Mida Daka. El Ador the Tani. When's it true that a nachtom, a baker doesn't have to take out my his machmor chanuso or pes chanuso when he sells in his store on the opening of his store. Why? Because in that case, they make him sell for less. The government makes him sell for less. The government, push down his profit margins. So since that's the case, Chazal, in turn, we're making him say he doesn't have to take off the money. Okay? Avol, if he's selling in the marketplace, or b'chanusa shu samach lepalter, in his store which is next to the marketplace. Now, for some reason, palter generally means a goyish baker, and I guess what it means here is that he can blend in with the non-Jewish bakers, and they're not going to check him so much and oppress him. So in that case, he gets to sell for more money. In that case, Meiser al Kol. In that case, Chazal made him take off Demai, and not just Trumas Meiser Chala, but they made him take off even Meiser Sheni. So it's our Mishnah, says the Gemara, it's only talking about a Jewish storekeeper, Jewish baker, who's oppressed by the authorities, and they keep down his profit margin. But if he's selling in a way that they can't tell, right, because he's selling next to the non-Jewish baker in a way that they don't realize what's going on, so in that case, he has to take off everything. He has to take off even Meiser Sheni. On that, Olay, on that statement, Chavrai b'shem Rabbi Lezer, the Chavrai is the name Rabbi Lezer, to Rabbi Meir, that this is going like Rabbi Meir. Now, which Rabbi Meir? So now the Gra takes out the next line. till Heidon Rabbi Meir. Do you have the line below that, Heidon Rabbi Meir? You have that? Hey Rabbi Meir, which Rabbi Meir is? The Tzina L'Batzar we learned subsequently, Rabbi Meir, Eshadarko Limdod B'Gasa. Somebody who normally sells large measures and is exempt from Demai, Umodado B'Daka, and now he's sold B'Daka. Tfeila, now it should be Tfeila Gasa L'Daka. In this case, he doesn't have a status of a wholesaler. He loses that status because now he's selling retail. Don't think just because normally he's a wholesaler, so even when he sells retail, even when he sells it, exact measures, he's exempt. No. His exemption is only when he sells Begasa. So say to here, this baker, who's exempt from giving Meiser Sheni as part of his Demai, Chazal giving his Kula, don't think it's all the time. It's only if he's under oppression. If he's not under oppression, then he has to give the Meiser Sheni of Demai. Okay? The Tani Rabbi Chia came. Rabbi Chia, I'm not just Chia, Rabbi Chanina. Do you have actually it spelled out? Do you have Rosh Davis? Also Rosh Davis. Tani Rabbi Chanina came. Eshadarko Limodi B'Gatsa, so which is normally is wholesales. Umodado B'Daka, now he retail. Tfeilo should be again Gasla Daka. He has to now sell, has to take off the mic. V'chein Palter, so too Palter. In other words, if he's selling and they're not oppressing him, he has to take off the mic. Chein Palter. Mida Daka v'chanus Mida Gasa. If he's selling powder and he can get away with selling at retail, even though in his store he sells from Mida Gasa, Feli Gasa Daka he has to sell now. He has to take off from the Demai. Chevraya b'shem Rabbi Yossi. Well, now why is that? Why is there a difference? I mean, why does he not have the status all the time? So the two reasons. The more obvious reason is the second reason. The first reason is the less obvious reason. Chevraya b'shem Rabbi Yossi say, I think it's Rabbi Yossi, Mivnei Tinokos, because of the children. The lo yechlun tevel. In other words, children don't know that he's normally a wholesaler. Adults might know, but children don't know, so they'll come by him and they'll think it's Meiser. So therefore, now that he's selling retail, he's got to take off the mic, even though normally everybody knows, all the adults know, Yankel's the wholesaler, he doesn't take off the mic. Now they're selling retail, the kids might come, and they won't know, so therefore he has to take off the mic so the kids don't eat the mic or bring home to their parents the mic. Okay? Rabbi Lo B'Shem Yochanan said, no, it doesn't have to do with the kids, it has to do with his own profit margins. This is the more obvious reason. I told you before, second reason, more obvious reason. Mida Daka Hova Mocher Mistaker. By Mida Daka, since he's making more money, Hamoicher Mafresh. He's got to take off Trumas Meiseres of the Mai. Mida Gasa by wholesale. Hova Lokech Mistaker, since the buyer is making more, right? Because he's getting more of a bargain. So in that case, Halokech Mafresh. Masnisa Messiah Ledain. The Brisa says this one. Masnisa Messiah Ledain is another Brisa, it's just another one. Masnisa Messiah Chevraya. There's a Brisa which is a raya for the Chevraya. What's that Brisa? Rabbi Nechemar Eshu Tafel Ladaka Kedaka. That which is when he sells beside it, he's selling a little bit, small measures. And then together with that he sells a large measure. So that has a din of the daka. Even though now he's selling like a wholesaler, doesn't matter. His status of retailer, he has to take off Trumas U'Maiseres. The bulk of his business is retail, right. Okay? And vice versa, if he's normally a wholesaler, even though now he sold a small amount, he made like a retailer, he's got to on that which he sells, retail, he doesn't have to take off Trumas U'Maiseres. So here he's the Demai. He sold a retail, it doesn't matter. So here we see, we go by his status, right? So if he's a Daka guy, so we go as a Daka. If he's a Gasa guy, go by a Gasa. What would be the exception? We're afraid of kids. In other words, here we see that he does have a Chaloch of status. Status does apply. So the only time we don't follow his status is when he goes into the marketplace and we're afraid of kids buying from him. Then he does have a status normally, Yankel the wholesaler, Yankel the retailer, and that's how we regard him. Masisa B'Sai Rabbi Law, there's another brayso which helps Rabbi Law. Tani we learned Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yoel ben Broka Amar Mother Lo B'Daka Chayav. If he measures him B'Daka, in other words, if you're a real wholesaler, but now you happen to retail, you got to take off the mai. You told him an astronomical amount of grain to saw as a wholesaler. And they had a little bit as a rova, a quarter of a kav, a much smaller measure. You tacked it on and sold as retail. Tzorch laser is also rova. You have to meiser that rova, which there's no status halacha. That measure which you sell as wholesale, you're exempt. That measure sells retail, you have to take off. Why? Because in that you have a higher profit margin, and vice versa as well. Amar Rabbi Zira, a cheshbon. It's getting late. Let's finish the next mission, then we stop. Amar Rabbi Zira, the next mission is two more lines. Well, you can see that there, right? Amar Rabbi Zira said, cheshbon schar b'neim. There's not enough community between the two of them. Shimra belong to Chevraya. But it has to do with the, he says that has to do not so much with the measure, but the profit margin. Modelo sale in your Nevi'im, if he sells a large amount, but he sells it in small measures, right? So he's selling a gas amount, but by DACA standards, since the moicher is mistaker, he makes a lot of money. Mocher mafish, he's got to take off the trumas and maisus, right? Mochel revealing his sale, and vice versa. If he sold small measures, but he sold them by wholesaler standards, since the buyer's making in that case, right? So mafish lokech take off the trumas and maisus. Now, in both these cases, we must be aware. Obviously, this is only according to the opinion that holds that it depends how you sell it. But according to the first opinion, which is Rabbi Yossi, that it goes by status, this won't make a difference. Because if you're status wholesaler, you don't have to take the status of retailer, you do have to take. We'll stop here for tonight.